Let's start from the fact that they told us it was sugar in the bags. Does this mean that neither the FSB specialists nor the Interior Ministry know what sugar looks like?
People who've seen hexogen just once in their lives could never take it for sugar. You just have to put a bit on your tongue and taste it. You can tell in a couple of seconds. There are no explosives with a sweet taste.
Could the
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. And welcome back to the Lost-Begotten channel. Today I've got a special treat. It is a 42-minute documentary, which I may be pausing to comment on a bit. And I'm plan on giving a bit of a dissertation at the end in regards to what knowing what you're about to learn might open your eyes to, that is very relevant to your life, very relevant to our society, and very important for the future and for protecting our way of life. Now, I must say, it is not surprising to me at all that there are 0 people watching right now. Because what I'm about to show you is probably the most important piece of information on the internet. It is the singular key, if you will. The most refined skeleton key. The key of keys, right? Key of keys and gourd of gourds. No, wait a minute. And it is absolutely crucial to, say, the Russian internet trolls who usually suppress my broadcast, to understand exactly how shitty their rulers are, their enslavers, their oppressors, their owners. Okay? And for my American viewers and international conspiracy buffs and people who just want to know different people's perspectives, what I'm about to show you and what we will discuss subsequently will be the only way that you can fully comprehend what's going on in the world. And by that I mean, what are Vladimir Putin's real motives? What are the extent of his capabilities? Exactly how sinister can he be? Why is it that Alex Jones is affiliated with RT? Why is it that Donald Trump is friends with Alex Jones? What is the real danger of the relationship between these 3 individuals and what they represent? So Alex Jones I just refer to as an archetype of Russian propaganda, because he embodies exactly what you have to look out for. And the subject matter that he has, propagated for the last several decades has been pointed in one direction. And if you'd like to know why, keep watching, because it's about to become very, very clear to you. So, before we get started, I'd like to give a couple seconds for anyone watching to share the link. And I'm going to go bring my wife her phone so she can do it. Hoping she could share the link for me. I don't use all these confusing series of tubes anymore. Like I said, my internet was slowing down, so I poured some liquid plumber on it because I heard it was a series of tubes. No, never mind. Anyways, so looks like we actually have a joiner. And this could be up to an hour and a half, maybe a couple hour documentary as far as my whole presentation goes. But like I said, this particular documentary, we looked at a couple of clips of it the other day. It happens to be 42 minutes and change long, and, well, needless to say, that makes me kind of happy. But fortunately, and also interestingly, this is a
Operation detected
one
a
of
mistake.
multiple copies. Oh look, for some reason, for no fucking reason, it just went all the way back to the goddamn beginning. Fuck you, YouTube. Fuck you very much. Fucking annoying pieces of shit. Just showed during the fucking credits.
Sugar for hexogen.
Oh, fuck you. Just showed during the fucking credits that I fucking backed it up all the fucking way. But let's just sit here for no goddamn reason again and do that all over again. Having fun yet? I'm just gonna stare at the camera again. Fucking people piss me off. Not just the fucking evil you do, but the fucking stupidity drives me insane. You have to be fucking stupid to do this shit you fucking people do. Boo! That entertains me. That little image I happen to make there. Anyways. So let's see if I'm allowed to actually change where I'm fucking watching here. Ermagerd! It lit me purrs! Now I'm going to take a deep breath and try to remember if there's any deep thoughts by Jack Handy or otherwise that I would like to mention before we commence. So anyways, hold on 1 second. Okay. Just making sure it's safe to proceed. Checking over the fish tanks, making sure everything's okay. Had some corals get knocked over. And anybody else gonna join us? Maybe, maybe not. Who's here watching? Just like one agent control monitor, or like is that an actual person there? How can people possibly be this clumsy? Oh, I see. There was something on the ground. God forbid anybody pick it up. Parenting. James. Good to see you, brother. It's nice to know at least, people might not be watching because they're asleep or have lives. Although it would be much nicer if, people were allowed to just see the title of my live stream and decide for themselves whether they were interested in what I had to say. But no. Doesn't matter what subject matter you're interested in. It doesn't matter if your entire life you've been searching for the different things that I put in my search tags. you will not see this recommended video broadcast at all, unless you are not just a subscriber, but a persistent subscriber. You have to fight for your right just to watch this crap. And, well, sorry. I don't know what the fuck to say. But, things would be a lot more interesting and entertaining and productive if YouTube would stop censoring the most important videos, or the moist important videos, whichever you prefer, on this platform. Okay? And I don't just mean this video that you're watching right now. I don't just mean the videos that I made that would have, if allowed to go viral, stopped Trump from getting elected. And largely put a dent, just put a measurable percentile dent in the effectiveness of the divide and conquer strategy that has been set against this country for generations, not just decades. But even this video, posted in 2013, and several others like it. This video here, 4,628 views. That's preposterous. The title of this documentary, as it is shared on, I see it's got multiple uploads. And oh look, they've already refreshed this. Oh wait, no. I actually had to reload it. That's my bad. Although I've seen it just refreshed for no fucking reason before. But anyways, they had a couple of other copies of this had shown up on the recommended videos here. And the name of the documentary from 2000 is Blowing Up Russia. This guy's video has the title of the film, and it has Assassination of Russia. The channel is simply called Looking East. Relatively innocuous. Seems to be enough of an interesting title. And if appropriately recommended amongst its peer perspective videos, should have millions of views. Like here, Crash Course World History, which is a completely ineffectual video. Russia, Kievan Rus, and the Mongols. It's got 3.69 million views. Why? Just why? Because free speech has effectively become legalized racketeering when it comes to YouTube. If you speak against the mafia that controls it, you don't get to make views. You don't get to make money. But if you just say generic, innocuous crap that perpetuates the ignorance of the status quo, welcome to success. Anyways, so I guess it's just you and me, Mr. James. Feel free to, post links or whatever. And, man, this is something. Okay, this ain't just something. This is something else. Okay. And the one thing I want to mention to any new viewers who might be watching this
in the future
is that, yes, in the future, as my wife says.
What?
As my wife just said, in the future.
Yes.
Yes. What? Yes, I was repeating you. What? Huh? Okay.
Apparently my blindness is spreading to my ears. I am ear blind.
You're ear blind.
I'm ear blind.
The most interesting thing, I think, to keep in mind as far as just understanding this particular story, not as it relates to any of the players that we've come to know and love, but, and I use the term love very sarcastically. This guy here was fighting with the terrorists, basically. He was a Chechen rebel leader at the time of the quote-unquote anti-terrorist operations in Chechnya. And, like any rebel leader who turned against his country and yada yada yada, to punish him, Vladimir Putin put him in charge of Chechnya. Wait a minute. Just when you thought a statement was going to make sense. Anyways. So just keep that in mind. That just utter obvious contradiction that indicates, the most clear evidence of any false flag ever, basically. And his particular presence and the false flag that it is relates to something that happened way back during Vladimir Putin's rise to power. And it explains a lot about what's happened to us. It explains a lot about my instincts and perceptions of things over these past few years. It explains a lot about September 11th and how divided we became after that. And it explains something that the media, quote unquote, the news, the free press in this country, needs to really consider getting on top of. You see, they managed to blame us for everything on a whim. Anything that goes wrong in Russia, they'll just say the fucking CIA did it, won't they? But for some reason, we bind our own hands and do not connect the dots. Even if they're on fire and exploding and shooting at us. Well, I'm sure you may not have thought they would ever talk about Russia's attempt to interfere with our election, but they sure talked about that, didn't they? Now, I just assume that you're being a sarcastic little douchebag because you're pro-ignorance. So just why don't you think about that aspect of yourself for a while? I'm gonna move the fuck on. Terrorism. That's what Vladimir Putin's been up to. That's what the Soviet Union had been up to before they feigned their collapse. And that's the reason why they spend so much time and money trying to intimidate people and influence them. You see, little Russian troll, the quote-unquote mainstream media is what you made. Don't sit there and bitch about the product of your own creation. I have every right to. You do not.
Autumn 1999. A wave of bloody explosions swept through Russian cities. On the 4th of September, in Bunaksk, in Dagestan, 62 people died in the rubble of a tower block. On the night of the 9th of September, in Moscow, an 8-story apartment building in Guryanov Street was blown to bits. A toll of 90...
Don't say our election. You're not an American.
4 dead and 164 wounded. At dawn on the 13th of September in the capital city again, a powerful explosion totally destroyed a 7-story building on the Kashira Road. 119 bodies were pulled from the rubble. They included 12 children. 3 days later, in Volgodonsk in southern Russia, 17 people died in another explosion. Russia
Shut
had
the
never
fuck
before
up
been
and listen.
subjected to such acts of terrorism.
Look. Just in case you are new here and not the Russian troll who has been stalking and harassing me for about 4 years fucking straight now. Okay? Let me tell you this. You'd have to be as dumb as a fucking post to not realize that Russia has cultivated Donald Trump as an asset for 30 years. Okay? And anybody who doesn't like people trying to defend this country is a fucking traitor and should hang right alongside him. Now, educate yourself.
Dagestan, 62 people died in the rubble of a tower block. On the night of the 9th of September in Moscow, an 8-story apartment building in Guryanov Street was blown to bits. A toll of 94 dead and 164 wounded. At dawn on the 13th of September in the capital city again, a powerful explosion totally destroyed a 7-story building on the Kashira Road. 119 bodies were pulled from the rubble. They included 12 children. 3 days later, in Volgodonsk in southern Russia, 17 people died in another explosion. Russia had never before been subjected to such acts of terrorism. Mass psychosis quickly set in. All offices and non-residential premises, cellars and basements were thoroughly checked. Civilians volunteered to patrol courtyards, stairways and landings. A multitude of checkpoints paralyzed road transport. Responsibility for the attacks has never been claimed, but from day one, the secret services put the blame squarely on the Chechens.
The people who organize these missions, who prepare the explosives, who deliver them, and have overall responsibility for everything that has happened are obviously in Chechnya. I can tell you with the utmost certainty, I can guarantee you that they come from the training camps of Khatab and Basayev.
After a 3-year truce in Chechnya, the war had now moved to the heart of Russia. With public anger running so high, the Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin, ordered a bombing campaign to bring the rebellious Chechens to heel.
Russian planes are only striking the terrorist bases. We will follow the terrorists wherever they go. If they are at the airport, we will be there. Excuse me, but if they're in the toilets, we will go in there and blow them away. That's all there is to it. The problem is solved.
I love it when he
When the
talks all
first
fancy.
explosions took place in Moscow, then in Volgodonsk, the public was in a state of stupefaction and shock. This coincided with the appointment of Putin as Prime Minister. And I think that then about 90 to 95% of people, just like today in America, supported the action the President was taking to eliminate the Chechen bands. But what's interesting is that even now, it hasn't been proved that the Chechens did it.
Okay, so the finger is pointing at a whole people, the Chechens. But show me who carried out the attack. Show me who planted the bombs. They can't do it.
The slow progress of the inquiries, the absence of proof, the sheer scale and professionalism of the bombings all cast doubt on Chechen involvement. Speculation as to the possible involvement of the Lubyanka, the secret services, began to emerge.
To judge from the consequences, and they say that in politics you should always look to see who benefits, then of course there are all sorts of different versions. But the public is still very interested in the role played by the special services in all of this.
After public demands for peace, the enraged Russian people turned against the Chechens and the war was renewed. There's little doubt that it was the toughened public opinion that put the young hardliner Vladimir Putin, the former head of the Secret Service, the FSB, into the Kremlin. To this day, the only terrorists detected in connection with the bombings were FSB agents.
Wait, could you say that again, please?
Former head of the Secret Service, the FSB, into the Kremlin. To this day, the only terrorists detected in connection with the bombings were FSB agents.
The only terrorist connected to the bombing. The only individuals, excuse me. I mean, that's clearly not an objective statement that he made. The objective version of that statement would be the only actual named individuals connected to any of those terrorist bombings in Russia were FSB agents. That is an objective statement of fact.
The first suspicions of special service involvement in the bombings came after 3 explosions had already claimed more than 300 lives. It was then, on the 22nd of September 1999, that a bomb attack was apparently averted in Ryazan. It was officially passed off as a civil defense exercise, using a mock-up device.
Rain's pouring.
But many Russians believed the bomb was real. To them, President Putin's rise to power is now seen in a very different light.
Full version.
Those involved in investigating the mysterious events in Ryazan include journalists from Novaya Gazeta, one of Moscow's last remaining independent publications. And since the FSB doesn't like it when people pry, the newspaper has had more than its fair share of problems.
We consider that, according to the law, according to the Russian Penal Code as it stands, the facts disclosed by our paper should lead to the opening of a criminal inquiry to establish if those facts are indeed well-founded. But instead of that, a slander suit has been brought against the paper.
Oh wait, so
In August,
they're going after the The media.
That's familiar.
So, like, if someone came and burned your house down, and your neighbor called the fire department, would you blame your neighbor for burning your house down?
2001, Novaya Gazeta took a risk when it published extracts from a book by Yuri Felshtinsky and Alexander Litvinenko, The FSB Bombs Russia. The historian Yuri Felshtinsky was born in Moscow and since 1978 has lived and worked in the United States. He has written several books on the history of the USSR. An American citizen, he was the first foreigner to obtain a Russian doctorate in history.
We all know that information often comes out after failed operations. That's what's happened here. The FSB tried and failed to blow up a building in Ryazan. The details are clear enough now to make it a textbook case. We know everything. What car they came in, how many of them there were, when and how they planted the bomb. We even know what time it should have gone off. And it can hardly be a coincidence that these attacks stopped after the bungling of Ryazan. It would have been stupid to carry on with a flawed battle plan.
The NTV television channel, then still independent, took an interest in the Ryazan case. In March 2000, it broadcast an open debate with everyone involved in the affair in its show Independent Inquiry. Thanks to these images, which strangely enough have neither been seized nor destroyed, we can reconstruct what really happened in Ryazan.
Oh? Go on.
On the 22nd of September, at 9:10 in the evening, a suspicious scene was played out in front of an apartment building. Two men and a woman unloaded 3 large bags from the boot of a white car and carried them into a basement. A second suspicious point was that the number 62, indicating a Ryazan vehicle registration, was written on a piece of card and taped over the car's real number.
I drove straight past them, but I went back to look at the rear number plate too. And sure enough, it was the same. A piece of paper with 62 on it, taped over the end of the registration number. It made me suspicious, so when I got home I called the police.
A patrol car arrived at the scene 1 hour later. The car had gone, but the police made an important discovery in the basement of the building. 3 large 50-kilo bags and a homemade detonator programmed for 5:30.
Wasn't it a lovely basement?
The patrol chief was Andrei Chernyshev. Pavel Voloshin, a Novaya Gazeta journalist, met him soon afterwards.
He told me he was sure it was a serious situation. He'd seen the bags, a wire coming out of the bags, and there was a detonator. He was sure he had prevented an attack, and that, thanks to Kartofennikov's phone call, hundreds of lives had been saved.
On the NTV program, the tenants of the building recounted the details of what they saw and went through that night.
When the police went down to the basement, they weren't very enthusiastic because it's in a terrible state, and some people use it as a toilet. But when they came back up, the expressions on their faces were very different.
The cops were running all over the building, banging on doors and shouting, "Everybody out, there's a bomb in the building." After what had happened in Moscow and other places, everyone went down into the street in their dressing gowns and slippers.
We've got a 3-year-old. We grabbed him out of the bath, soaking wet. We wrapped him up in a towel, put our heads down and ran.
I got there at 10:15 that evening. I brought all the people who live in the building together and told them, we've checked the basement and the attics. The building is safe. And I told them, as head of the local FSB, you can go back to your homes.
This is the first statement by Sergeyev to contradict the facts. The tenants actually spent the whole night in a nearby cinema. The inspection of the buildings was taken so seriously that they couldn't go back to their homes until the following morning.
We weren't allowed back in, and the police stayed in the building until 10 o'clock in the morning. They let us away at 2 o'clock.
I noted down 1/4 midnight.
We were taken to the October cinema. There was no heating. It was freezing for the children.
Well, I was there with you.
We were all there in the October cinema. There's no point in lying.
Maintaining a false version of events is always difficult. Not long before this clash, General Sergeyev had been telling a completely different story.
I was with you all night. I worked with you until morning. We spoke to each other, and yes, the situation was certainly serious.
On the night itself, the former head of the Ryazan office of the FSB was as certain as anyone else that there had been a bomb in the building.
Sergeyev came over to us several times. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, when the bags had been checked, he got us all together in a circle around him and said, "Today is your second birthday." There were 3 bags of explosive programmed to go off at 5:30. You would have all been there, and you would all have been blown sky high.
From this statement, made on the night by the local head of the FSB, it was clear to all that a real bomb had been defused.
There were 3 bags. The one in the middle had a hole in it. There was an electronic watch inside with wires coming off it. I put my hands in and started gently taking the wires out of the bag.
This photo of the detonator was taken the next day, the 23rd of September. As for the bags, analysis revealed traces of hexogen, an extremely powerful explosive. Acting on the experts' conclusions, on the night of the 23rd of September, the Ryazan public prosecutor ordered criminal proceedings to be instigated in accordance with Article 205 of the Penal Code, terrorism. 1,200 police officers and soldiers were thrown into the hunt for the bombers. Their identikit pictures were pasted all over town and distributed to all police patrols.
There were 2 men, one with a mustache and a woman in a tracksuit. She was sitting in the back.
On the evening of the 23rd of September, Prime Minister Putin announced to the world,
2 men and a woman, remember that.
As far as the events in Ryazan are concerned, I don't think they made some kind of cock-up. If these sacks with the explosives were noticed, that means there is at least one plus factor, that the public is reacting in the right way to the events taking place in our country today. In this way, Putin confirmed that a terrorist attack really had been thwarted in Ryazan. The Ryazan telephone exchanges had been put on red alert. The telephonist, Nadezhda Yuknova, intercepted a suspicious call to Moscow. The number that was dialed began with 224, which is the exchange that services the Lubyanka, the FSB headquarters.
They said, "Is the woman with you?" "No, she's taking the trolley bus at noon." "Where's the car?" "The car's in the car park." "Leave Ryazan separately. There are checkpoints and patrols everywhere. And I mean, anyone would have thought, because everyone was thinking about terrorism.
Thanks to that phone call just 24 hours after the discovery of the bomb, the police had already located the suspect's hideout. But then something quite inexplicable happened. On the same day, the 24th of September, 2 government ministers speaking half an hour apart in the same place made 2 completely contradictory statements. events.
Bingo.
Vladimir Rashailo, Minister of the Interior, categorically stated that there had been a failed terrorist attack in Ryazan.
Positive measures are already being taken. One example is the prevention of an explosion in an apartment building in Ryazan.
But then Nikolai Patrushev, director of the FSB, immediately contradicted his colleague.
First of all, there wasn't an explosion, and an explosion wasn't prevented. But it wasn't good work. It was an exercise. There were no explosives, just sugar.
Sugar?
The fact that Interior Minister Rashailo apparently knew of no such exercise could suggest that a real bombing had been thwarted. Several months later, during an NTV broadcast, an FSB spokesman stressed the official line. It had been an exercise. But he let slip that it was a joint exercise between the FSB and the local police. The exercise order, he said, had been signed by both ministries.
A major operation involving all the members of the Russian Federation was jointly planned by the police and the FSB. The operation was codenamed Anti-Terror Whirlwind. It was signed by Patrushev and Rashailo.
Even high-ranking Secret Service officers had difficulty supporting the exercise version of events.
I don't get it. Why did it take 2 whole days to tell the world it was an exercise? Frankly, it's incomprehensible.
Well, it's obvious. We wanted to check the logical follow-through of our operation, including the hunt methods for terrorists. That's why we didn't reveal it was an exercise.
Right, but you couldn't have told Rashailo?
Well, you know, things can sometimes get muddled during an exercise. Anyway, during the exercise, we were checking our systems and the systems of the Interior Ministry.
Well, can you believe this? Rashailo says it was a great achievement, and half an hour later, Patrushev says, oh no, it was just an exercise.
But Vladimir Putin found himself in an even more awkward position. He had also announced that a bombing had been thwarted. Had the Prime Minister known about the exercises in Ryazan?
The notion that until Patrushev's announcement on the 24th of September, Prime Minister Putin didn't know about any exercise being held in Russia is improbable. If that was the case, Putin would have had to sack Patrushev the moment he heard that the exercise was being held in Ryazan, because it would have meant that Patrushev had not only misled the whole country, but Putin too. Patrushev didn't lose his job. So Putin must have known that Patrushev was holding an exercise in Ryazan on the blowing up of an apartment block.
The members of the Ryazan FSB were not informed about the operation run from Moscow because of the need for secrecy. But they had seen with their own eyes that the detonator and the explosives were genuine. They found themselves in a very tricky situation.
To put it mildly, Sergeyev wasn't pleased. In fact, he was beside himself with rage. After all, in this case, his professional pride as a member of the Special Services had been trampled in the dirt. How could an FSB general not know what was going on in his own patch?
Even worse, now the Moscow bosses were trying to force the local Ryazan FSB to change their game completely. And then, to cover themselves and separate themselves from the actions of the center, the local Secret Service men published an absolutely unique statement.
I would say this document is concrete proof of the involvement of the FSB in the Ryazan attack. I'm going to read these few lines from the Ryazan FSB statement. It has been made known that an imitation detonator, discovered on the 22nd of September, was part of a joint operation. This announcement came as a surprise to us. It came out just as our agents had identified the place where the bombers were living in Ryazan and were preparing to arrest them. It was precisely at this moment that Patrushev replaced the real attack story with the exercise theory.
Just hours after the Ryazan incident, Alexander Stanovich had appeared on Hero of the Day on NTV, but he didn't mention an exercise. His accusers say that either the excuse hadn't yet been conjured up, or he was buying time for the Moscow FSB bombers to escape. But he was already downplaying the Ryazan affair.
According to the information currently in my possession, no explosives were discovered. Even the reports that came out on the morning supposedly analysing hexogen fumes or hexogen haven't been confirmed by our specialists.
And the detonator?
You know there weren't any detonators. There were things that only looked a bit like a remote control or several components of an explosive device.
But many of the tenants of the building had seen the contents of the bags that were planted in their basement, and the substance did not resemble sugar.
I saw those bags lying there, no more than 10 feet away. They looked like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't hexogen that was in them, but to start with, it was yellowish and really fine, like chopped vermicelli, some kind of granules, I'd say.
I can assure you with total confidence that there wasn't any hexogen. And, by the way, to go back to the explosions that happened in Moscow and other cities, there was no hexogen there either. A quite different explosive was used.
6 months earlier, the leaders of the FSB had said something entirely different about the explosions in Moscow.
We have received new information that traces of hexogen and TNT were discovered. This already indicates that the explosion was definitely not an accident.
So why did the FSB suddenly start denying that hexogen had been used in other bomb massacres? It's alleged this was to eliminate the similarities between the real bombings and the so-called exercise in Ryazan.
At various different stages, the discovery of the explosive and the gas, the analysis, the panic, the FSB had several opportunities to make a prompt announcement that this was an exercise. Why was that not done? Because the FSB didn't think anyone would pick up the trail. Just at the moment when the terrorists were about to be arrested in Ryazan, when the people and their hiding place had been identified, at that moment Patrushev announced that there was an exercise going on. And so the announcement by Patrushev himself that exercises were going on in Ryazan was, of course, an indication that the terrorist attack had been planned from the top, and with Patrushev's knowledge.
In order to support their exercise explanation, the FSB produced an agent who'd been involved. The public was presented with a back-to-camera interview of a special services officer.
Following orders issued by my superiors at the FSB, as the first step in Operation Anti-Terror Whirlwind, our group was instructed to go to Ryazan to carry out a mission. And that's what we did. We bought sugar and made an imitation detonator. The 3 bags of sugar were purchased at the local market.
In order to lend the exercise version credibility, the leaders of the FSB appealed to veterans from its own special units to put on a show of corporate solidarity.
Putin has said there are no ex-secret service agents. That's simply the kind of people we are, and no matter what happens, we never retire.
The Special Services veterans were poorly rehearsed for the press conference. Or perhaps they simply learned their lines badly.
They deliberately pasted over the front plate like the paper said and wrote the number in ink. They deliberately didn't paste over the back number because it might attract attention.
I went back to have a look at the rear number plate, and sure enough it was the same. A piece of paper with 62 on it, taped over the end of the registration number.
Our FSB officers went down there and worked out why the sample analysed had indicated the presence of an explosive. The kind of instrument used for analysis has to be absolutely sterile. But there was old sample material still in it.
But what does practically no explosives mean? The FSB claimed the analysis was tainted, maybe to cast doubt on the first analysis of the sack's contents by local explosives expert Yuri Kachenko.
Kachenko himself was very amused by the statements from the FSB Public Relations Center that his hands and the test instrument were tainted and that he hadn't washed the instrument down. According to Kachenko, that kind of instrument should never be washed.
In the numerous interviews with the Wimpel FSB groups who supposedly took part in the operation, not even the times of their arrival added up. They claimed to have left Moscow on the evening of the same day. But anyone who's traveled from Moscow to Ryazan by car knows that it's physically impossible, whatever speed you're going at, to get to Ryazan so quickly as to have the time to buy sugar in the local market.
The FSB claimed the sugar had been bought in the evening, but an operations photo was taken in daylight. In the face of such major discrepancies, the FSB stuck to their story.
It was sugar, sugar. As for the explosion of the detonator, there wasn't any detonator at all. They bought 3 batteries in a shop, a shotgun cartridge, wires and all the rest, made a mock-up and put it on the bags of sugar.
The FSB spokesman tries to cover every point like a report, but he doesn't mention the most important part of the detonator, the electronic watch. And furthermore, as the explosives expert Kachenko stated, the detonator was not placed on the bags.
There were 3 bags. The one in the middle had a hole in it. There was an electronic watch inside with wires coming off it. I put my hands in and started gently taking the wires out of the bag.
There's one surefire way of blocking investigation: turn to the official secrets laws.
We have people on our secret staff, but we never show them. The pictures we released, when they related the details, were taken from behind, but by all means show them again.
Don't bother. According to what the boss of your investigative department says, there was a cartridge, an imitation detonator. So why didn't Sergeyev figure out it was a mock-up? Stop trying to pull the wool over our eyes.
Let's start from the fact that they told us it was sugar in the bags. Does this mean that neither the FSB specialists nor the Interior Ministry know what sugar looks like?
People who've seen hexogen just once in their lives could never take it for sugar. You just have to put a bit on your tongue and taste it. You can tell in a couple of seconds. There are no explosives with a sweet taste.
Could the evaporation detector have mistaken sugar for hexogen?
No, it's not possible.
And yet an analysis that requires just a few minutes was dragged out for 6 months in the FSB laboratories.
As soon as the investigation's over, I'm prepared to meet you again and give all the details.
When might that be?
That I can't say.
How can it take several months to analyze sugar?
Well, there's a queue, you know the way it is.
In its efforts to be seen to be doing everything by the book, the FSB went to the point of absurdity.
The bags that the FSB claims contain sugar, that we're convinced contain hexogen, were confiscated, and then it was announced that the bags were undergoing further analysis. Now, if it is sugar, and we're sure of that, why do we need this analysis? And after that, they were blown up in a safe zone. But if you know it's sugar, why do you need to blow it up?
A bombing attempt or a blundered exercise? The FSB continued to serve up explanations with no apparent concern for how ridiculous this sometimes appeared.
The material evidence in this inquiry is sealed in this bag. We can't open it without the permission of a judge. But we brought it with us especially to show that it was properly documented and all is on the record. So there's no question you can go on saying it's explosive when it's sugar.
The FSB are watertight against investigation. Once again, when the chips were down, they resorted to their final protection, state secrecy.
I repeat, we're a secret service, and as such we use all means at our disposal in the law to carry out operations that you're not aware of and shouldn't be aware of, apart from what's stipulated by the law. We're talking about state secrets.
Even this is inaccurate. In the law on operational and investigative activity, not only is there no article about exercises, the word is not even mentioned. So the operation in Ryazan was clearly carried out on some other basis.
I've been sitting here and I don't believe these fairy tales I've been hearing from the FSB. I'm an old military man too, retired with the rank of head of staff of an entire military unit. Do you know how many exercises I held in 28 years in the service? And now, no one will believe you. All believe in that sealed bag, all those files with all your papers and analyses. No one will believe you.
The idea of the exercises appeared after the public discovered that something was going on. Exercises have to be announced in advance because the public is involved with them. Because this is a civil defense exercise. I'm certain there weren't any civil defense exercises going on.
If there had been an exercise, they would have presented us with mountains of paperwork signed by the top brass of the FSB. The fact is that this paperwork doesn't exist, because if it existed, they would have shown it to us. This proves, of course, that it wasn't an exercise. Apart from all that, in a country where bombs are already going off everywhere, where several apartment blocks have already been blown up, nobody with any common sense would hold exercises that were so similar to what happened in Moscow. Nobody would organize exercises in a country where a war was already going on.
Remember that the NTV program was broadcast before the new president began tightening the screws, and the residents of Ryazan openly mocked the exercise version of events.
Stanovich, Sergeyev, and the other gentlemen of the FSB are trying to convince us that it was an exercise, but we don't believe them. Is it because the citizens of Ryazan are too stupid, or is it because your lies are unconvincing?
Alexander Badanov, who offered to help our film crew, had a bag of heroin planted in his pocket by FSB operatives. Then they threatened to take action against him if he met up with us. And the reception we were given in Ryazan in November 2001, 2 years after the memorable events there, was not very hospitable. We tried to interview one of the central characters, General Sergeyev. He refused, which is understandable. We hadn't arranged in advance to meet him. But that wasn't why our group had to leave Ryazan. As we left his office building, some men in civilian clothes took us to one side.
They give us a long-winded lecture on how the streets of Ryazan are unsafe, on the rampant criminality in the town, and on the dangerous driving habits of certain local hoodlums. They asked us, if anything happened to you, which it probably will, whose fault would it be?
Later on, 3 months after this trip, Pavel Voloshin was interrogated by the police in Moscow. The only citizen of Ryazan who was not too afraid to be interviewed was Viktor Lazinski. And that might have been because after what happened, he was forced to emigrate to the USA. As the president of the Ryazan branch of the Helsinki Monitoring Group, he was given an unambiguous warning by the local FSB.
It was obvious they were simply going to kill me. A local FSB agent would just go up to a down-and-out in the square and tell him, "You see that guy with the beard, buying cucumbers at the greengrocers? He's bothering my wife. I'll give you a bottle of vodka and a packet of cash if you bash him on the head in a dark alley one night." Unfortunately, that's how the secret services have been doing their business for the past 5 years. There are no written orders, no paperwork, nothing to be stored in the archives. Just a corpse some wino finished off with an ice pick.
So were all these threats and persecutions triggered by a simple civil defense exercise in Ryazan? Or are the exercises continuing, but now all over the country? NTV's talk show was shot in an age that is now past, an age when people were not afraid to speak out.
It's the same old story. They're trying to make us look like fools. The FSB themselves are investigating an FSB exercise. It'll be an open and shut case. It's a terrible thing to say, but I think it was all true and it wasn't an exercise.
I don't understand why we allow ourselves to be led by the nose by these people. They're just trying to clean the filth off their uniform coats, but they're covered in filth underneath anyway.
Who had the right to organize this operation? An operation involving civilians. Who had the right? Who gave the orders? Who had the right to give such orders? The president. Who else?
Citizens may only be involved in exercises with their consent. Otherwise, no matter who took the decision, it's yet another infringement of the law.
Let's just imagine that real explosives were planted and it was a real attempt at provocation in order to increase tension in the Caucasus and so on and so forth. Do we have any guarantee that we would have been given an accurate reply that the public would find convincing to the question of what had happened? I suspect, unfortunately, that we wouldn't.
There's no secret about it. When the inquiry's over, you'll be able to ask all the questions you want, either yourselves or through a lawyer. And if you don't trust the security service, we'll answer to the public prosecutor.
One more falsehood. After the broadcast, the citizens of Ryazan tried in vain to bring an action against the FSB. They got nowhere. Even though the criminal case was closed, it was classified as top secret, in direct contravention of Article 7 of the Law on State Secrecy. This makes it illegal to classify as secret information on events which threaten the health and safety of the general public.
Of course, these classifications remain in force for 75 years. So I don't think we're likely to learn what really happened for at least 75 years.
The Russian parliament could intervene and see to it that the truth was known. That is why on the 18th of March 2000, two Yabloko party MPs, Yuri Shukoshikin and Sergei Ivanenko, demanded an inquiry into the revelations in the Novaya Gazeta newspaper.
It was a fairly innocuous request. Look into a newspaper story and get answers to some questions about what happened and what didn't. Even this attempt met with violent rejection because it was seen, and rightly so, as an attempt at civil control over Secret Service activity.
We haven't had an answer yet about whether it really was a terrorist attack that was thwarted, or whether it was passed off as some sort of Secret Service operation, an exercise or whatever. It's a secret shrouded in darkness. We still don't have any reliable information on the matter.
If the truth about the incident in Ryazan came out, the government would be forced to answer questions about who was behind the explosions in Brunaksk, Moscow, and Volgodonsk. And that's something both former and present members of the Russian Special Services are agreed upon.
The entire history of the KGB is just full of this kind of activity. And in this context, I believe the incidents in Moscow and Volgodonsk, and then later in Ryazan, that failed explosion, I believe they're all links in the same chain.
The style used here is absolutely clear. The group looked around for the premises, preferably in the basement or a ground floor. They rented them under the guise of storage space for some kind of goods. and the explosive was shipped in. In a day, you could quite easily bring it in and set up the explosion. It was delivered disguised as bags of sugar.
But if we assume that all the explosions in houses in 1999 were the work of the special services, clearly it must have taken several months to plan and prepare for them. In August 1999, the FSB was headed by Vladimir Putin.
Yes, of course, it's possible that the president and the top brass had nothing to do with it. And there could have been a group of patriotically inclined officers who planted bombs and blew up not just one house, but 10 or 15, taking the risk for the salvation of the state they love.
One more question. The explosions have taken place. The so-called Ryazan exercises have been held. So now, why doesn't Putin, as president of the country, hold an investigation into what happened? I think the answer is obvious. Either he knows perfectly well what actually happened, or there is, in the final analysis, another global explanation. That Putin doesn't really control anything that happens in the country.
Whether a special service plan to mobilize public opinion against Chechnya or a genuine anti-terrorist exercise, a genuine investigation of the 1999 bombings is too risky. If the inquiry were to establish that responsibility rests with the Secret Service, then the legitimacy of all those presently in power in Russia could be called into question.
Well, another copy of it just showed up on another channel. In fact, it's worth seeing how long it's been up. Similar quality, published November 25th, 2016. Prescott Bush's fascist coup attempt. Oh, those are the good old days. Standard Oil. Oh. Because the Cold War was over, and the only people that were evil had to be Americans for some reason. I was even naive enough as well to be sitting there thinking I could be learning the real truth about my own government from Russians. Oh, 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 oh. See, now I have a wife from Yugoslavia. And she does not allow me to be so delusional. So, Joey, you got a new job. Okay. You got a new job or she got a new job? What? Oh, You got a new job. Okay. Well, good for you. I hope it's something you thought through. Neville! Speaking of people who never think things through, I mean, kidding. I'm kidding. So, man, I have seen, a few minute clips at a time of this documentary. Not as far as I can tell, man. You got it well together, mate. I could be a lot harder on myself. Anyways. But seeing this documentary in its entirety, you get a profound, not really profound, a more comprehensive sense of the temporalness of the events, like when they happened, and that people of the time were witnessing them and talking about them, and that these things were discussed and contradicted themselves in real time, and as many different supposed false flags and different things we've been told about by Alex Jones and the like. It's all too easy to picture exactly what these people were fucking going through, isn't it? And forgive my memery during the video, but considering that things like this make me think a mile a minute, I just wanted to maybe share some of the things that they were saying made me think of, at least as I passed through them in my mountainous folder of memes. But yeah, Alex Jones and all his friends, all those very interesting people. They're so insidiously full of shit. One can only really laugh at it. This is Alex Jones, and we're talking about the Illuminati and the Bilderbergers and Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Two of these guys don't really look like frogs. But have you noticed how many Trump supporters like Alex Jones and different people who just bullshit everyone all the time and just have that, I don't know, almost like short man complex version of Mammonite syndrome, just greed overwhelms them. Take a look at these guys. Look at the guys on here. What's with that chin? All I'm saying is that, there's a bunch of neo-Nazis and people like that thinking that it's a good idea to let these guys do our thinking for us, basically. And I'm just pointing out that by your own standards, paranoia and Nietzscheanism, you have failed. See, there's a reason why the Russians and Mongolian, Manchurian, Northern Chinese, Uzbekistani, Kazakhstani horde has so much in common with the Islamist extremists and the general chauvinists of the world and Republicans. In fact, Russians, the ones in power now, even back when they called themselves the Soviet Union, refer to themselves as Republicans. When someone does well as far as their citizenship goes, they are told they are a good Republican. That's what it means to be a good Russian citizen, a good Republican. It's one of the ways of saying that. Now, Republicanism in America used to mean an entirely different thing. I used to be a Republican. I would have preferred to have stayed a Republican. I would have preferred that the church in America that had progressed towards a non-denominational, actual coherent understanding of Christ's words. A little thing we forgot about is a pretty good catchphrase for it, called compassionate conservatism. It takes the shape nowadays in the form of what can only be called rational conservatism. Because through deceit, people have been lowering their guard to the point where they have actually ceased being compassionate and still call themselves Christians? And have subsequently become so deceived as a result that they have become completely irrational. And if you're surprised by that, all I gotta say is, yes, you should have known Trump was a snake. Okay? You should have known. I knew. How the hell did you not know? How can you call yourself a Christian and not know that this is a fucking snake in the grass? He wasn't even a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was like a T-Rex in wolf's clothing, you know, like, for fuck's sake. Well, Neville, this is the, the new Lost-Begotten channel. This isn't, my old channel was now called Easy Reefers, so there's, a limited number of subscribers on this one, even though, none of the 3,000 subscribers that I had before were allowed to follow me down the right rabbit hole. But as far as active suppression measures go, yep, still seems like Google's just having their way with controlling my viewers. And then I get basically this troll who over and over again pretends to be a new viewer and just does the same shit every single fucking time. Like, he tries to seem different, but it just doesn't work. And today alone, he realized that the whole getting muted and then immediately coming back with a different screen name thing was a bit obvious. So he decided to actually shut the fuck up. Maybe, just maybe, this is a new person. And what the person in charge of these guys didn't see coming when he terminated the previous one, as I mentioned he should last night. Then I go and pull this crap on the new guy, Poor guy. Because really, it just takes a genuine lack of intelligence to understand what I'm saying here, and that it is correct. You see, the simple fact is, we have some knowledge to go on, and we don't need single source theories or speculation to put together a plot, murder weapon, motive, location, planning, intent. Give me 1 second. I just realized the dog's drinking out the fucking toilet. That fills water bowl. So that was one of those, oh thank God the toilet water is clean moments. Like when you drop your cell phone in it? No. I've heard, allegedly, that people drop their cell phones in the toilet from time to time. I myself have only managed to drop my cell phone in my aquarium. Was it while filming or live streaming? Yeah, that was rather unfortunate. Alright, Dingo, that's enough. Don't binge drink the water, Dingo. You'll cough that shit back up. It's like, the water's so good. Yeah. No matter how clean fucking toilet water is, it probably still tastes like poo. But then again, dogs eat lots of things. But, anyways. I have made it a policy of either not using my phone on the toilet. I certainly don't use the phone while peeing. But if I'm going to go in there and take a shit and bring my phone with me because I'm like, trying to put an eBay cart together or something like that, I maintain a state of nervous vigilance. Don't drop the phone. The whole time. Just the whole time I have don't drop the phone, don't drop the phone, don't drop the phone. Like Rain Man just repeating himself. Definitely don't want to drop the phone. Definitely don't want to drop the phone. Yeah, that would be bad. Definitely don't want to drop it. Anyways. So, apparently that's where I store my little Rain Man voices, right up here in this part of my head. So, yeah. The thing that these people have in common, I guess why they found common ground, as it were, really it was greed, But there's always the few special people at the top, right? And then there's the people on the ground who have to get, made angry. To get people to do what those people in that picture are doing, you have to make them angry about something. Oh, yeah. And I bet you every single one of those people in that crowd right there, just like Trumpists today, have at least 3 things that they will spout off to you that the media won't tell you the CIA was behind. Oh yes, the CIA is behind it and the media is covering up. What you don't seem to understand is that for generations, Russia has sent us people to infiltrate our media. That's why we call it media now, because that gives reference to an empire from which some of the ancient origins of these people comes. And you have NSA agents. You have, our officials there, okay? And then our retired officials who aren't like covert field operatives. And, either sometimes aren't necessarily on a need-to-know basis or, maintain a plausibly deniable, willful detachment from certain situations. Like, the guys that we're talking about today, Clapper and Brenner and those kind of guys. Well, the ones that get assigned to work in the field as undercover news people in this country, they have the duty of, much like Hillary Clinton during her 11 hours of testimony, not mentioning what the Russians were up to. They have the duty of not presenting evidence that accuses Russia in general. This has to be cleared basically by the president to be done. Okay, and if you'll notice the few times that our current national security, quote-unquote, people have done these things, they have made a point, a political point, but still made a point of saying that the president approved it. And this has been the case, this has been the official policy or the outward policy of our government since the Warren Commission. Because, well, it was the Warren Commission. And to anybody who doesn't realize, the Russians were the ones behind Kennedy. Grow up. Like, seriously, just let your brain ripen or something. Just grow up. Just please, grow up. How's it going, Mr. Conway? Have fun. Drink prune juice. I mean, kidding. Drink light beer. I hear it gets you less drunk. No, that's not how it works. Anyways, you might want to check this one out later, Mr. Conway. This is the full version of that little documentary I had found a few days ago. So anyways, see, I still consider myself a conservative. I forgot what I was just talking about, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. And I never really considered myself a conspiracy theorist. I just considered myself someone who wanted all possibilities investigated, and I didn't like people covering up facts. But when you take into effect the existence of Russia, which most conspiracy theorists don't. I mean, they just, for some reason, don't. They're certainly not told to by the conspiracy channels that are allowed to become popular. Once you understand how our agents and their agents make up at least 20% of the people you see on TV, you begin to understand why the rest of them are so clueless. And really, it becomes a matter of you're only comfortable going maybe a little bit further than each of your colleague has gone in what you're willing to say on the air, on MSNBC or CNN, or even, certain programs of Fox News. Sweet. Going away party for somebody who's going off to Oz. Australia. I don't have two of these images. I'm just going to forget about that. How about I just get rid of both of them? There we go. What is that? That is that. Oh. What's that? Oh, that is that. Okay. Going through my files, making sure I'm not overloading myself. So, yeah. You had basically the Warren Commission says we don't want to implicate the Russians. You had an investigation that did not implicate the Russians, but it didn't explain anything about why, Oswald was speaking Russian to a KGB colonel, and there was a fucking babushka lady on premises, which a babushka lady, what they do, if you were paying attention back in 2014, like I was, when the Russians were invading Crimea and Ukraine, is they seem to just be kind of on hand overseeing operations. And other than loading Facebook and trying to scroll through years and years of posts, the best thing I could do to prove that I was actively keeping track of this situation and had already made the determinations that I have now. See my little info whores graphic? Well, that particular Android photo viewer right there is arranged by date, as you can see, and if you've used an Android phone, you know exactly what you're looking at. That is the little date that pops up as you scroll. The time frame from those images was contemporaneous with the events. It was during those events that I had already determined the nature of InfoWars, and that all the conspiracies we had been taught by him and his associates were a psychological warfare campaign against the American people and the West in general. So for a year, I had this campaign on Facebook, and then a year after, one year later, I had established this channel and gotten enough of an initial seeming, at least, following that I felt comfortable. There were enough people that were real people that knew about the channel that I was safe actually starting to discuss the real reason why I had made the channel, which I had spoke about in my very first video, but only vaguely. But if you look at these videos, America is in danger. Time to act. Now see, this still image is from 2016. See? That's why it says a year ago. And those videos, every single one of them, those three right there, all had a great deal of views when I had posted them. I was getting between like 300 and something to 1,500 views per video at that point. And unlike what happened shortly thereafter, I didn't have the whole a few views happening all at once and then it just died down and then nobody viewed it ever again. These views were, happening several times a day, sporadically, over the course of a week. Dingo, stop chewing your ass! Sometimes I just don't know. So anyways, what you're looking at in the first video frame there is a clip from Ukraine Today and a lecture about it. An icon from Ukraine Today. Talking about the Eurasian Union. How basically the Soviet Union has been reformed. The next video, I'm talking about these same people organizing false religions around the world and throughout history in order to enslave humanity. The next video is about how people get bullshitted into becoming mental slaves of a nation state that is set against their own state. And that is what Trumpists have become. How's it going, Mr. Rodriguez? Anyways. So, this is for the edification of new viewers and basically placating the pseudo expectations of our troll friend just to annoy him. Anyways. So what you have here is the long-time infiltration of various religions and using those religions to further expand their territories and to divide and conquer other territories. And it's not just limited to Islam, but the most extreme and bloody conflicts that have come of this, history knows as the Horde. And I think it's rather suspicious that the Islamic aspect of the Horde, the fact that it is essentially a result of sultanries built on Islamic extremism, that just doesn't really get mentioned. Just as the Siberian Khanate always seems to be the uncolored portion of the map in the north. And of course we've gone over this, my favorite little map, that illustrates how the history of the Horde and its relevance to Islamic extremism is extremely important to understand so that one can comprehend the reality of the threat that we face today. And that is that the Soviet Union planned to so this is the latest fake viewer. The Russians planned to, as of the early 1970s, starve their own people, risk thousands of lives, cost thousands of lives, by feigning the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then, by their own words, they would then use Islamic terrorism to destroy the United States. Now, you, whoever you are, need to go back and watch this thing from the beginning. Anyways. I built a school over 2,000 years ago, but that was in a former life, so it's not really on topic for this video. Other than that, no, I have no formal training, nor do I require any. However, there is no person with formal training who could win an argument with me. Which is why people like you get sent here. Anyways, so the Russians were not only willing to starve their own people, and by that I mean the horde, your masters, you know, the frog-looking fucks and the bushy-eyebrowed people that, well, just nobody knows where they come from. The ones that enslaved the Ukrainian Thracian descendants and, you know, basically keep as slaves, as pets, what many in America confuse as being white Russians. They were willing to starve those people over here in this part of Russia. Just so that they could steal a bunch of money from American investors and to, like cowards, get us to lower our guard. Because the fact of the matter is, he that has honor desires peace, not revenge. Revenge, when it comes to how nations are ruled or led, becomes nothing but a tool that greedy men use to go to war so that they can take what they want. And so Vladimir Putin could take what he wants, as you would see in the beginning of this video. He had his little secret police sacrifice many Russian lives to tighten his grip on power and to push his way downward to control the passes between Crimea and the Caspian Sea, to control areas of transit between Russia and Turkey and Iran and Iraq, to control areas that the Horde has always controlled. There are many aspects to this strategy, and I've discussed nearly all of them. But what an American or a Russian troll who supports what is going on right now needs to know is that no matter who you are, you're just being manipulated and used. And the only reason I bother making videos is to try to set you free from this bondage. Now, Putin invaded Chechnya. All of this has happened before. You know, this is something that is so cyclical in history. I know it like reflex. And I really advise people who fail to be able to perceive things through the limited perspective that we get on the television to educate their imaginations a little, to educate their hearts a little, to educate their conscience and their sense of honor a little, by watching some fictional science fiction shows like Star Trek and SG-1 and Battlestar Galactica. And if you're really wanting to understand how the principles of power play politics with the people, the book Dune is an eye-opener, especially with what's going on right now. You see, for those of you who have read the book Dune, if I were you, I would keep an eye out for Fade Routha, because Trump is clearly the belligerent nephew of the Fat Baron. Although in our case, the Fat Baron is actually a bald hobbit of some sort. I don't know. Lord of the Rings is another fairly productive imaginatory exercise that can, you know, once you learn some of the counterfacts to the universally, or the unidirectional wave, I should say, of online propaganda and conspiracy that I've come to term the Shilliverse, you can start to learn more about the historical aspect of this, start to learn more about the Horde, start to learn that it goes back 2,000 years and beyond, all from the same direction, coming at us non-stop, enslaving one people after the other. The White Russians weren't the first, okay? And the Lord of the Rings, it really does build your imagination and help you grasp the facts in a more, I don't want to say comprehensive way, but a more open-minded way. Because it really takes a profound level of neuroshock to open oneself up from brainwashing. And that's what's gone on today. We have been enslaved by our minds. It's like a fucking zombie apocalypse, only metaphorically. These people are eating our brains and making us go and eat other people's brains. And, you know, the particular part of their brain that they've been selecting for years has just been, you know, it's the CIA, it's the Illuminati, it's the Bilderbergers, it's all these different fucking people, but Russia does nothing but help you learn the truth about them. And we've committed no genocides, no conquests, no genocides, nothing to see here, no actual MK Ultra really happening. Okay. Have you fucking heard that creepypasta? Oh my goodness. That's terrifying. Anyways. So what I mean by history repeating itself as far as Putin's little conquests, during this time period, or about 1444, Kiev lost its control over Kievan Rus, which is considered to be the historical founding land of Russia, right? Because of the Horde. Okay, and at this point, the Horde had become basically a feudal alliance of Islamic sultans. Okay, and Kiev, the city, was just about to get annihilated, and they sent emissaries up the river to go to Sweden, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania to ask their cousins there for help. And I think they never got the message, something like that. If you go up the river, the Muscovites basically operated a series of trading posts centered around what we now call Moscow. And for some reason, this backwater trading post little, warlord, horde, group, they were able to fend off the Horde by themselves. And then we have Russia. And then you have, Catherine the First and Philip and Ivan, and yeah. Oh, and then a little burpsy. Excuse me. But anyways. So yeah. This is something that for some reason people don't talk about. And it's because, first of all, you've got on the one hand the stigmatization of Islamophobia, right? Okay. And then the incoherence that applies from my algorithmic suppression, because nobody really yet knows that you can just call it the Horde, and you're not being like hordist, I'm not being racist against people that are being enslaved. I'm not being religiously discriminatory based upon people using false religion to divide people of a faith. And while I, as a Christian, consider that I have a right to debate, which I can just now with thousands of years of knowledge, any other belief system, that is irrelevant in what needs to be a centrist, national security-based conversation that we teach apolitically about history so that our citizens have a sense of actual, a place in this world. Not just actual patriotism, but a path behind them that shows them the path in front of them. We are lost as a people. We have no direction other than progress for the sake of progress. Meanwhile, while we worry about our own little progress, the world has just been conquered Okay? And it goes back to the foundation of our country. You know, look at the little last date on the center of that little map right there. It was a 1502. Now, when was it that Columbus sailed the ocean blue? I mean, what you might not realize about that is that people that were fleeing the horde had secretly been colonizing the Americas for well over 1,000 years. Leif Erikson didn't find Newfoundland and stop. He found Newfoundland and said, because by that point they had already been fighting the horde for 1,000 years. By that point, Attila the Hun had come. By that point, they had basically, they're alone in Ireland and north of Hadrian's Wall, had lost touch with the original co-equal matriarchal and patriarchal non-chauvinist church that existed in post-Ptolemaic Greece, which you might now know as Egypt and Palestine. How's that for educated? I'm a pretty fart smeller. Just drop my lighter. But anyways, pay no attention to me. I'm just the crazy guy who thinks India crash landed. So anyways, I have two pretty distinct family lineages. One is the German, Scotch, Irish that settled Houston, and the other is Acadian, or Cajun French. And just in case you're interested or have heard any of the House of Akkad things, the Acadians through France go back to that house. That's where the word Cajun comes from, actually. No, I don't read from anything. I mean, I read y'all's comments, but other than that, I'm just kind of looking through the images on my laptop here. I can, in case you are either a new agent, which I'd advise you to watch your back because of how much you would have learned in this particular episode. But just in case someone new, because of a link that got shared, actually managed to make it to the video. Here is what I see. Oh, wait, that's not okay. It's not really working. There's my laptop. There's my fish tanks. There's my other fish tank. There's my other fish tank. There's my other fish tanks. There's my TV. It's still paused on the documentary. And there's, like, what is down there? It's like my foot. There's my foot. Okay. Can't really see. Wait. I have a game. I can do my laundry, or I can turn the brightness up. There we go. Oh, look, it's an exercise bike thing sitting on an ottoman and a really, 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 really dirty floor. Is that a fucking pre-filter? Damn it! Airline hose, water jug, dirty, dirty work area, and fish tanks, and posters and, pictures and memorabilia. Actual fucking record player that we still haven't set up. Supplies. Ceiling. kitchen. Oh, a pile of sheets. Yeah. Old aquarium. You get the idea. I ain't looking at shit, man. Stuff. Anyway, and this is where I stare. That way. And looking that way. And I'm looking that way. Looking that way. And I'm you get the fucking idea. But yes, this is the Easy Reefers Fish Room of Science here, where I teach my ungrateful little children how to save the planet that they've horribly fucked up in ways that are not political. Although I have republicized, after making several of the videos from that playlist I showed earlier on the channel previously known as Lost-Begotten. Oh, I said it right that time. It's now just a symbol. Some of those videos are now up and public again, but I generally speaking just talk about how everyone needs a fish tank so they can understand that the fucking world's about to die. And I have basically an entire series of designs waiting to save everyone's life. Because I like to design shit. That's why you kept one of my notebooks, for fuck's sake. Nice little coded name for anyone who finally gets it. But I, myself, as far as my conscious spirit, not just the fragments of my souls that were lingering afterwards, have been removed from this plane of existence for about 400 or so, about 450 years now at this point. So that should give you an idea of where and when to look for my last incarnations. But anyways, it's been a interesting journey in my life, which I can only sum up as far as the credibility of the experience, as to say that for most of it I considered many of my experiences, as far as memories that I've had from childhood goes, to be nothing more than dreams. And then I met the girl who was in the dreams, and Houston, we had a problem. And since then, I have to deal with really just annoying reminders of my purpose in life, like let's see, the last time I was in a zealous enough mood and went back onto the camera and said, "You want to see who I am? This is who I am." And a very interesting thing happened, which, during my struggle of self-doubt took me some time to deal with, but now it's just kind of a hello, Captain Obvious kind of thing. Because not only did lightning strike right behind my finger on that particular occasion, as you can see from the little pillar of light, but it struck in a cross-section with what looks to be my face on the clouds, and going through the right eye, which at the point of which, like pride and lust stopped being the problem and the root of all evil, but then like deception actually became the root of those things. That was because I had exorcised the evil goddess from the sun, and she was at that point and from that point on, in her Leviathan form, physically visible in this fucking eyeball right here. Which, happens to contain a slightly parallel universe that I created, but that's just a long story. Anyways, how are you? But as far as research goes, I don't think it's boastful of me to say that I should be the subject. I consider it to be psychologically healthy that I should say that. Because, you know, despite my quote-unquote record-breaking IQ, I could actually be as smart as they told me I was. I could actually feel smarter than that. And I still would not really trust my own judgment. But I do have the judgment of others, as you can see. Anyways. And like, you know, among the profound experiences, just in case you are a new viewer, the first time I ever had a thought which I considered to be blasphemous, which, if I was mistaken about my identity, would be blasphemous, was when I created my first internet screen name back in 1994. Because at the time I considered myself a very vigilant Christian. I considered myself to be an exorcist. I felt like God had some power and purpose for my life, and I intended to learn everything I could to use that to benefit the hardest of cases, I used to call it, which meant Wiccans, physicists, Satanists. Bring them on. I will fight their ignorance from their perspective. And I asked God for my soul's name. And I immediately, I mean just without hesitation, Nothan, the word, Noathan, and the spelling, came to my mind. Along with the sudden blasphemous thought. And I said, no. No. Because that would mean that possible interpretation is that means that, and that means no. Just no. And I kept kind of feeling, yeah, yeah, yeah. I gotta do that sideways so you can see the elk horns. Bullwinkle. So I, like a good little Christian warrior, attempted to make a covenant with God at that point. I said, okay, if, not even gonna like repeat the thought back during the covenant in my head. If you're fucking serious, the following request should be no problem. And this is still something that irritates me to this day. I don't like being me in that way. I just want to fucking breed clownfish and like set up a little fish store and like design and sell buildings. That'd be great. You know, if people just were not morons to the point of self-destruction, it'd be nice. And I had no idea at the time how stupid people would become. Like I said, I used to watch Star Trek. I thought we were headed to a brighter future. Didn't we all back in 1994? Didn't we all? If you know, fucking not like pissing on your uncle at that point. Which really doesn't define your age, but if you weren't young and you were still pissing on your uncle, I'd like to party with you. Kidding. Not really. Only if your monkey was an uncle, or you were a monkey's uncle, or something like that. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. My screen name. My soul name. What I said was, right now, if you want me to even consider that, in the distant future, right now, because now is the time that I learn this name, I said in my mind mockingly to God. And now I never hear the voice of God. I don't fucking hear voices. When I asked for this name, I heard the name and I got the idea of what it was and spelling. If that was hearing God's voice because I heard the pronunciation of the name, maybe that's the only time in my life I actually heard a voice. Okay? It's more about intuition and understanding. And at that point in my life, understand this. I didn't even know that... Excuse me, 1 second. Oh, shit. Excuse me, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Maybe 4. At that point, I really considered myself to be burdened by knowledge and having like a handicap of faith. And I didn't know whether or not what I was praying to was just my logical calculation of what God should be. You know, as far as the answers I got back, the intuition I got back, I could only put my faith in it and see where it led, and see if the plan that seemed to result of it and the fruition thereof were greater than that I could imagine myself. If the things that came from this were beyond explanation by the capability of subconscious understanding, then my faith would be justified, and I continued to put faith in these things, even things that were very scary to me before I went into them. And when it came to this name, okay, God, I don't want to be a crazy person, okay? So, first, I don't want you to make me think these things. I don't want to think this thing. I just want a fucking screen name, okay? I'm like actually looking up at this point. As silly as I acknowledge it is to look up when praying. If you want me to believe this shit, right now, there should be a child born with that name. Nothan. N-O-A-T-H-A-N. But wait, there's more. Not only did I want there to be a child born with that name, but I had considered all the implications. Not all, but, you know, hundreds of implications of what that would mean at the time. So I also considered that if that were the case, that he should have no problem with the following request, just to make sure that I would be certain in the future when I would discover this person, if they were born at this time. Their first name, Nothan. Their last name, Cox. Because I was a horrible, perverted little smartass Because I was a 15-year-old boy. 14, I don't fucking know. I don't know. Somewhere around there. Fucking teenager in the 90s, for fuck's sake. Joey was on here earlier. That's my brother from another mother, or something. And again, pretty much all these guys who you'll see who are allowed to regularly find the broadcast, most people have to be directly linked to it to come here. I got friends from back in New Orleans who watch, but I usually either broadcast when they're at work or when they're asleep, so they don't come on the live streams very often. And since you have to have a channel to comment, you know, we don't hear from many of them. Anyways. So, the original Star Trek, yes. I haven't watched that since I was a little kid. I actually, saw more of that than The Next Generation when it had first aired. And like, you know, I'm always like one of the stubborn old fogies, even like before my time when I was a kid, I was already a stubborn old fogey, you know, about TV shows and music. Oh, you know, it's hilarious to think about. But you know, another one that's really worth checking out as far as sci-fi shows go is Babylon 5. It has an interesting perspective on the possibilities of spirituality as it pertains to heliocentrism or the time of the kingdom of heaven. Heaven, you know, space. Did I mention I've been seeing the future my entire life? Yeah, I see the future a lot. That too. Possible futures. I see the choices that lie between them. Be forced to make a lot of them. And as far as that little kid goes, in 2011, when I found the girl from my dreams and began to wake up to my memories from past lives and get my bearings on like where I was in relation to them and where like my ancient enemies were, where like what the fuck has everybody been doing with themselves kind of thing. I had a series of profound revelations, which I don't care to go into because I'm trying to stick to this one little part of the story. And one of the things that I was focused on doing was debunking. Okay, wait, no, clearly, it's much more likely that I'm going crazy at this point. Much more likely, just obvious. So we went on Facebook and searched for the name, Nothan Cox. And there he was. Fucking right out of school. Baseball player. I couldn't see his birth date, but guessing from his age, approximately, he would have been born right about that time. That means that I don't have a choice but to sit here and make a fool of myself and try to get attention to everything else I know. Because based on what I know, humanity is in some serious fucking danger. Oh. Crud. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Anyways. That is way too bright for that fish tank. Let's see here. That's a lot of effort for a temporary view. Oh well. Can't say I don't try. Well, you can. It would be very nice. Alright. Reggae do. Do what you do. Well, it's been a while since I bothered putting that fucking thing on. Eric Dubé and Mark Sargent. Yes, I'm so glad they're rich and I'm poor. That's very productive for society. Thanks, YouTube. Christ was also a fisherman. Yeah. As were most mercenaries of the time. Better at fishing than most commercial fishermen. INRI. No. Henry? Like Henry VIII? I hope you enjoy your meal. Catholic? No, not Catholic. My church preceded the Catholic Church. Anyways, thanks Joey for sharing the video, I guess. Apparently that was somebody he sent. Anyways. It's too bad that's all the focus I can get out of there, huh? That's a little better. I could move that tube that's in the way, but that would require getting up again, so. Womp womp. So, who's still watching? How you doing? What do you think of the FSB getting busting themselves? Before Alex Jones came around to tell us how evil our government was. But of course, after the X-Files, you know? After years of subtle paranoia being sown. Yeah. Funny how that works. And then, of course, we come to the era of this asshole. Is this asshole worth it? I don't personally think so. He's not worth what you know about that's happening. But if you consider that Russia was supporting Gaddafi, who supplied terrorism, supporting Iran, who supplies terrorism, supports North Korea, supports all kinds of different terrorists, including the Taliban. In fact, it wasn't the CIA who established the Taliban. It was, in fact, the Russians. You see, the Mujahideen had helped convince the Russians to strategically withdraw. They didn't quite retreat. And then a provisional interim government was established, much, like we do. And then that government was overthrown in a violent coup by the Taliban. And they've been buying weapons from Russia ever since. Exclusively. So the very idea that the CIA was behind the Taliban was bullshit. And should give you an idea of just how much the Russians influence our media. And again, thanks to whatever law mandated the Warren Commission, government agents on our side that participate in the press can't exactly speak against the media when it comes to Russia. They can't, once something comes out, they can discuss it. But they're not allowed to add anything as far as what they know from briefings about covert Russian psychological operations aimed at this country. And especially their involvement in international terrorism. And we even managed to bust them. One of our generals came out and made a public statement saying that they made open contact confirming that there were Russian troops from Uzbekistan in Afghanistan aiding the Taliban. And if a canner can can anything that he can, well, the canner can't can he? What? Where the hell is the picture that I've been looking for the past fucking 85 seconds? I don't know. Damn it. Is it an old? Can't keep talking until I find this, unfortunately. Allegedly. It was shortly after the Kunduz airstrike, Afghanistan airstrike, that I had basically been willing to bet generals, you know, if my channel wasn't suppressed and people could actually like hear about it, maybe somebody would have told them and I could have made some money. I was willing to bet that the Russians were at that point very heavily involved in the resurgence of the Taliban. And let's see, I don't even need to. I was trying to find the one that I had labeled graphically already, but don't I have? Where the fuck are all my Have they been conveniently deleted? I got one picture that's labeled over at Taliban in Afghanistan since 2015. I caught them on camera. But then the series of images that I thought it would be with, they're not there. Hold the fuck on here. I already had plenty of instances of Russian hackers accessing and deleting my files. But, let me just see if I still got this crap, because it's pretty interesting and worth taking a little time to show if I can find it. I've never had trouble finding it before. Oh, there it is. Cool. In a place I had looked 3 times already. Okay. Yay, brain fart, I suppose. Allegedly. But apparently all the base images aren't there. What's going on with that? I had several images to go along with this, and they weren't in the bin where they were supposed to be. Folder actually named bin, short for Benjamin. That. Let's see what the fuck. Old bin. It's supposed to be a fucking bin. Huh. Apparently I don't have my copies of the Kunduz stills that I took on this computer. Okay. Anyways, as I was showing during the video presentation, you also have this guy who fought against the Russians being put in power in Chechnya by Putin, and at this point Islamic State was what you called the varsity team. And then after this gathering of 20,000 Islamic Russian soldiers, they all in unison screamed aluminum achy barns after pledging out loud allegiance to Vladimir Putin. On this video, go see it for yourself. Or wait, no, not that one. The full version of the video, which you can probably still find, I'm sure. After this, a few weeks later, without showing up in Ukraine, without any significant land or attacks, land losses or attacks in Ukraine, and I was keeping pretty good track of it, fucking day by day. The Russians had shot down MH17 over East Ukraine, and then 48 hours later, Mosul fell. And you see what these guys were doing before Mosul fell is they were in Syria. And now, they not only got, well reported on at the time, and, we know that many of these guys came from Russia, but you can match up the guys that were at the Kadyrov rally, their gear and their weapons, because we have some very clear views of it. With not only those guys who took Kunduz, but even the guys who were the quote-unquote Islamic State militiamen from the places where they supposedly had came from in Syria, after liberating a bunch of the people that we are told are the entire, component of Islamic State from this prison in northern Syria. That was basically ran by sort of the new democratic Syrian government that was in resistance to Assad at the time, before he just started bombing his own people and shit. But considering that Pride had been defeated, these people were all too willing to videotape themselves having done this. Again, we know their gear, we know their equipment. And we can see that a lot of things that we thought were just, a bunch of indigenous brown people acting an ass, were in fact the results of a Russian campaign to cement its influence in the Middle East. We know what they look like. We know the gear that they carry. We know who you are, where you've been, where you come from, and we know what you've been doing. And that's the reason why they don't want people watching this channel. That's the reason why they have been psychologically assaulting this country. Because they don't want you to realize who's really hiding over the hillside. And shift and delete. So when one considers that they support all these different terrorist groups, that they support all these different terrorist nation states, that they themselves act like terrorists, and they even send fucking men, equipment, machinery, and missile technology to North Korea, whether or not your government's telling you about it or not, you know, it's just, you know, plain as day, just use your eyes right there. That's Russian equipment. As was a lot of what they used during those wonderful parades. In fact, despite the fact that I have fucking hiccups like a son of a bitch, I can try to show a few more examples of that. See, it's really easy to make missiles look different, but those basically look like, you know, the general type of missile that Russia has on those trucks. And those trucks are called Ural trucks. They make them in a lot of different configurations, and they have many different regions and armies and little nation states that they support that all use different versions of that same truck. But one thing that you might notice during this parade is these guys right here. See that little emblem right there? Well, here's a truck in Russia. See that little emblem? Well, doesn't that just look similar? Can we get a better look at it? It's called a recolor. Now, if that was a software company and this was a video game, you'd probably be really pissed off. But because it's Russia and they're trying to destroy you, you're okay with it? Wait a minute. That doesn't make much sense. So then you have, you know, once you've realized how much fuckery they're capable of, you need to start looking at what's happened to us. What's happened to the West? What's happened here in America? Are we in any danger because of this? Have we been attacked without us even knowing this because we didn't realize how much fuckery there was? Well, if Vladimir Putin is behind terrorism, And Vladimir Putin is behind Alex Jones and the Shilliverse. And Vladimir Putin is also behind Donald Trump. One must ask if there's anything these three people and these three agendas have in common. It starts with 9/11 and ends with 11/9. Both were attacks on the New World Order. Both were attacks on the idea that you should not conquer other nation states. And that trade disputes should from now on be done honestly, because we now had a World Trade Court. And we should all learn to get along. And anybody who didn't want to get along, watch out, because we might come bomb the shit out of you. Unless you're Russia, it's okay, Russia. You don't seem to barely know how to get along without anyone else. Or could it be that you just pretend to live like that so your people stay with enmity against everyone else? I wonder. Well, as it turns out, there is something that directly connects just how much of a threat Donald Trump and Putin and anyone like Alex Jones actually is. People trying to say lies that help their cronies oppress people, while pointing the finger at mainstream news, calling it media, and saying that they're the ones who are lying. No, Fox News is media. Rachel Maddow is a reporter. Understand the difference. It's very important. Alex Jones is media. I would be considered a genuine conspiracy theorist by comparison. He is a propagandist and nothing more. Never had an original thought or theory. And while Vladimir Putin was busy bombing his own people, and while the real estate market in New York City was crashing, Donald Trump decided to build a couple new towers in New York City. You know, because that's what you do when demand is low and supply is high. You increase the supply? No. But nonetheless, right across from the United Nations building, down there on the right, he built a brand new, shiny, black cube looking Trump Tower without the gold and shit all over it. It's a little subtle building right across the street from the United Nations. all in the time period in which we speak of on the news today as being the time period in which Donald Trump could not get loans from American banks and had resorted to funding from the Russian mafia. Hello! And of course, Saudis and Arab Emirates and Qatar and stuff like that. Oh yeah, funny how that works. Is that, like, painfully obvious when you consider the way he decorates shit? No, not painfully obvious. It's just a little painfully obvious. I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious. I suppose it would only be painfully obvious if you hadn't realized it yet, that Donald Trump's entire persona, his ideology, and his very style and way of spending money is more like Russians and Saudis and sultans and people that we just don't like. People that we don't have common values with. They don't have wives, they have slaves, they own their women, basically. They fucking own their women. And as far as ones that they would parade in front of you saying, look how moderate we are, oh yes, your women are free to shop. Let them actually try to influence things. See how far that gets them. See how those guys react to it. And while he and his friends had been peddling these conspiracies for years about how evil Washington D.C. is, how the CIA and the Bush administration and blah blah blah, and the Bilderbergers and the Illuminati. Oh. They would show you the pentagram of Washington D.C. But there's some things in the Bible that try to trigger your mind to keep watch. And one of those things, you probably wouldn't argue with me, is the name Abimelech. And if you looked up what Abi means, you'd know it meant father. And if you looked up what Molech, it means king. And it also refers to this deity named Molech, who's an interesting little headdress-wearing, sort of Mongolian-looking owl, professing his wisdom. But none of these people on the internets, none of these well-funded, staffed, marketed conspiracy theorist people have ever told you about that shit right there. They never told you about the giant Olmec thing. And if you want to zoom in on it, I'll show you a couple little zoom ins here. We have the spiderweb cross of Orion. The same little symbol that the demons were drawing on people's hands in the movie Constantine. And then, of course, we have Olmec's, or Molech, whatever his name is. Spider-eyed face, and Gabriel orb, UFO mouth. And don't forget the pyramid penis. Can't forget the pyramid penis. See that right there? That's down right here. And it's a pyramid, and it's a penis. Pyramid penis. But wait, there's more. On top of Old Smoky, all covered with chode, there is a mile-long penis hat of some sort. Pointing towards Europe. It's trying to fuck Europe. It's a mile-long penis hat on a giant owl with a pyramid penis trying to fuck Europe while striking a pose. But you trust the Russians and not me because they're going to help you stop the Muslims? As the Vietnamese would say, Duma. You know why the Duma is powerless? Because it basically means you can go fuck yourself in Mongolian. And the Mongolians are the ones who actually rule. The quote-unquote Russian people. And if it were not so, according to the words you probably preach, if you oppose me, if it were not so, that would not be there. Because what does that represent? The fact that it is the most expensive mosque in the world represents that you are our latest achievement. And they already knew at that point that their man, Trump, was going to win. Before Trump or Hillary had even announced, they already had a plan to get him in. You know, there's something you don't see a lot anymore. Islam will conquer the world. It's probably because at this point they'd have to say it in past tense. Because this extremist ideology came to control the policy of Russia. And Russia has supplanted America. So what does that mean? They have conquered everything. And at this point, according to their belief, their version of the Messiah should reveal himself. Let's see. Oh, wrong camera. Apparently he's a clumsy Messiah. Wait, no. Kidding. He's going to know things that no man knows. And he's going to have a forehead that looks like a planet. I wonder if I'm bald enough for that yet. And they say that he should have red dye in his beard. I don't have red dye in my beard. Although I suppose I could get some red dye and put it in my beard. But what I do have is actual red hairs in my beard. I'm starting to get gray hairs in my beard. I wonder, are my red hairs going to turn gray first? You know, because of less pigment or whatever. I don't fucking know. If that's the case, then I can no longer be the Muslim Messiah. Sorry. One might assume that, considering how much plagiarism, how much of a cover-up, and how much derivative of a slaughtered faith that Muslimism is. Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair. Okay. One can kind of speculate that there are some esoteric truths that were held by conquered people, assimilated people, that are at least echoed in some of their works. So to me, for me, it's not a matter of, if it's written, then it's true. It's a matter of if it's true, then it's written for a reason. And just like the Bible, I personally believe that the Quran, just like the Catholics, I personally believe that the redemption of the Muslims lies in resurrecting the matriarchal root of their former existence as a faith. And until the men of these religions face up to the lies that they have told that are plain as day to be seen, they're not going to be able to let go of this echo of pride that keeps them enslaved, that keeps the world crumbling. Yeah. So as you can see, the other rose bubble anemone has made it back out where it's supposed to be. So I'm relieved. It's opening up again quite nicely. But the one up here has seriously outgrown it. And that thing is like good 5.5, maybe 7 inches on the disc. It's just kind of sitting there relaxed. Got my 7-second wave timer going. That is bubble tip paradise right there. Just a little gentle current, and then just like a little wave on top of that. Just more gentle current, and then a wave on top of that. Oh, how long have I had the camera on mute? The microphone on mute? Jesus Christ. Oh, I hate it when I do that. I have no idea how long I was just talking for with the camera on fucking mute. Microphone, whatever. Digital technologies. Who's watching? I was just asking if you had any questions or comments. Now I have no idea how long it's been since the fucking microphone was muted. But I'm pretty sure it's James that's watching this. Well, I mean, we're kind of listening while he continues to play video games and stuff. Not really paying attention. Now slightly giggling. But, anyways. I think I was just talking about the anemone for the most part. This guy here has come out of the view, like the little hole that he was in, now has a view of the light, and has proceeded to expand and gain color again. And what that tells me is that he's finally ejected the last of the zooxanthellae that wasn't working for him, and now he may be able to, as he grows, get some of the zooxanthellae that he transferred to this other anemone back, because it, like I said on previous videos on the Easy Reefers channel, had changed as soon as I put that other new anemone in there. And that bigger, older anemone now used to look like this one did. And I want to make a video on Easy Reefers about rose bubble anemone care as being the easiest anemone, the beginner's anemone, basically, because for a long time I've really tried to narrow down what actually was the beginner anemone. Like, if you've never had an anemone before, you're relatively new to the hobby, if you can get an anemone, what should you get? Hands down, rose bubble. And while it's easy to maintain any coral or any just about anemone today with a substantial budget, because of the automated machinery and equipment and monitoring and all that good stuff, I was still skittish about whether or not I could, with my lackadaisical low-budget method, refine a stable environment capable of keeping anemones happy. And, well, now I have this guy growing without being fed anything more than the pellets that make it past the clownfish. And that's not a lot, because bubbles. She goes after that shit. But this gentle laminar flow with like a mild wave that comes across every 7 seconds, and being the furthest away from the harshness of it all, seems to be making those bubble tips really happy. And the lighting I have on there is keeping them growing without being fed. And that's how you want to grow, and then, like, that's how you want to keep anemones. You're doing well when you get to that point where you don't even have to feed the damn things and they keep growing. That means their zooxanthellae, all their internal algae that produce food, are, doing just fine. Now, you still want to feed them every month or so, because otherwise they'll lose their stinging tentacles and they'll get long even if you do have the perfect current on them. But as long as you're feeding them regularly and keep that perfect current spectrum, at least stay within the perfect current spectrum, don't have stagnant water, of course, and don't have too much current on them, they won't lose their tentacle shape and get all like elongated and blowing with the wind. The reason why mine still look all bubbly is mostly because of that current. They just shake a little. Sitting there hanging out and just, oh. Apparently my head does not make a very good anemone. Is a cigarette helping? Remind me to never do that again. Okay, anyway. Well, this setup right here is pretty damn easy to replicate for less than $500 with both tanks and all 4 lights that I have. I have 3 lights on this top tank. Running the whites at 70 and the blues at 95, something like that. Probably at 100. I think I had them on 95 for a little while. I know the Core Life. I have 1 Core Life Aqualight S, all LEDs, and 2 Current USA Orbit non-loop, the old Orbit, non-pro, just the regular Orbit. And those guys are probably set at 95, if they're still set at 95. I had them at one point set on 95, just to not have the full power output on them, you know, just to like, you know, I figure if you don't turn them to 100%, they should theoretically last a little longer, right? But overall, that's not entirely logical, because what it really boils down to is heat dissipation and buildup. And as long as you're keeping the whites lower, you're lowering the heat. But as far as how far I wanted to bring up all the lights, I think I do have all of the blues at 100%, in fact, now that I'm thinking about my logical process through it, my decision-making process. I kept inching up the white light past what was visually appealing to me, and past what even that little Monipora down at the bottom could tolerate, just to get those anemones as happy as I could fucking get them. As pretty as all of that other coral is in there, and as thankful as I am to have it, the reason for that tank right there was for me to learn how to keep whatever I decided was the easiest anemone to keep. Because I'm trying to grow them out. Now, right now, because of my limited water change schedule, I have to rely on light only to grow them out, which doesn't grow them very fast. But they're growing, so I call it a win. Anyways, I guess that's enough babbling about the fish tanks for now. James, you got any questions about shit or anything you recommend that I talk about before I finish this video here? Start staring at the fish tanks. I'm like, ooh, fish tanks. I guess we can get back to tying it all into Trump, right? Who's that, James? Who is that? Who's the one person that's still here? I don't know. If it's James, he's busy playing video games. Like, stop putting me on the spot. I don't want to chat. I'm not even supposed to be here today. Okay. So, this guy here, you can find a lot of interesting videos on YouTube about him talking about his good friend Larry Silverstein. And if you're not familiar with the propagandized version of 9/11 conspiracy, Larry Silverstein is the owner of the World Trade Center, or the bought leaseholder, kind of. Basically, to assume commercial rights of a government building, one has to acquire what's referred to as a 99-year lease on something. And it's kind of purchased like a purchase, and it's insurable like a purchase. And Larry Silverstein insured it for $4.3 billion more than it was worth, having acquired the building 5 weeks before it collapsed after being hit by 2 planes of questionable origin. I think a lot of the different conspiracy theories out there go way too far to speculate, but there's clearly something funny going on there. And even according to Donald Trump, according to a lot of people on the ground, according to anyone who's just willing to question the story of the status quo, it seemed that there were demolition charges set up there, but both in those towers, and at the very least in Building 7, in which Larry Silverstein, Donald Trump's great friend, was interviewed. And in this interview he said because there was such significant loss of life, we gave the order to go ahead and pull it, meaning the building. And that's why it just goes. But all these conspiracy theorists, like Alex Jones's other great friend, Donald Trump's other great friend, Alex Jones, when they promulgate these conspiracies, they act as though the United States government is the only government in the world capable of doing these things, other than the Jews. So right there, they have anyone who notices things out of the ordinary, a key constituency for a nation's national security, The watchmen, retired military, existing engineers, people who just know shit and know when to, see something, say something kind of people. Right? We were seeing something and we were trying to say something, and then we got all these websites and YouTube channels and stuff like that were agreeing with us and telling us it was the CIA and the Bush administration. And just after Putin had attacked his own people and had begun to conquer land in the name of terrorism that he had been staging, the Russians lost a submarine called the Kursk. And it is speculated that the Kursk was capable of firing cruise missiles. And even if you look at the most outlandish interpretations of these conspiracy theories, and you see the video of the orbs forming a plane, 3 orbs, 1 and then 3, and then it forms a plane. Again, they're not telling you anything about our country's greatest historical enemy. And they're not telling you for sure about the known sightings of a 3-orb, a tri-orb UFO. And they're sure as hell not telling you that there's some people who like to use the imagery of it. And they're not the Bilderbergers. So you have people at that time who may have been summoning or channeling some sort of interdimensional being, may have been experimenting with some hybrid technology. But there's a lot of interesting explanations for what might have happened there. But according to Donald Trump and his friends, they could not have involved him or Putin, the Russians, the people who were most likely and most capable. Larry Silverstein was Donald Trump's real estate lawyer, which means liaison for purchases in which he did not want his name on. Your real estate lawyer is given power of attorney to purchase these things in your name. Larry Silverstein has no record of doing transactions on that level before his procurement of the World Trade Center. And Donald Trump had, before this time period, wanted to significantly change the look and layout of the World Trade Center, had issues with the World Trade Court, and then after the attacks, said that he always wanted the Trade Center to be just the way it was. And out of one side of his mouth, giving credence to conspiracy theories and supporting people like Alex Jones, and out of the other side of his mouth, defending Larry Silverstein and saying he's his great friend. And yet all of these people that are allowed to be successful on YouTube, they don't mention that fact. They don't mention the friendship between Trump and Silverstein that solves the entire fucking puzzle. When you put these things together, you realize how much animosity Donald Trump had towards the World Trade Organization, had towards the ratification of his credit, how much fuckery Vladimir Putin himself was up to, the plan of the collapse of the Soviet Union overall, their historic support of international terrorism. And then you find out that Alex Jones, the Russian propagandist who was put in charge of blaming the United States for the 9/11 attacks, Mr. 9/11 is an inside job himself, never once mentioned, not one fucking time mentioned the friendship between Donald Trump and Larry Silverstein. He'd mentioned Donald Trump over and over again. He'd mentioned Larry Silverstein over and over again. Never in the same broadcast had the two names been mentioned simultaneously. And anybody watching this, feel free to copy the link to this video and challenge anyone, Alex Jones himself included, to watch this video and answer for the bullshit that they've spread. Because all he's done is the same thing that Trump's done, is cover the ass of our enemies. So, that's all for now. I do thank everyone for watching in the future and the past and the present and, you know, in the land before time, and especially with the Putin Pops. Y'all take it easy, don't take it all. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe. And thank you for your continued support to all of our donors and Patreon supporters and stuff like that. We, we're at that little hump in the month as we usually are. Hint, hint.
And unfortunately,
let's not say no more. But yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I would much rather AdSense and YouTube and like that stuff to work, but y'all already know that. So I'm just gonna shut the fuck up and end the video now. Thank you. Goodbye now. Peace. You see what I've done there is I've screwed that up because of the awkwardness.
nobody begging no more.